Good afternoon and welcome to the service where we remember and give thanks for the life of Prue Wilson, and we have an opportunity to say farewell. I'm Jim Cunningham and I first met Prue in 1990, 30 years ago. I also forgot to welcome those that have joined us electronically. This is a new experience for me, talking to people I don't even know if you're out there. But if you are, welcome. And a special welcome to the family in New Plymouth and in Auckland who are joining us on landline, or whatever it's called. You can see I'm electronically challenged. 4 centuries ago, the poet John Donne, the Dean of St Paul's Cathedral in London, wrote words that might be familiar to you and which I'm paraphrasing. He said, "No one is an island entire of itself. Each is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. Each one's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind. Therefore, do not send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee." There's a truth in there. Whether we like it or not, we're thrust helter-skelter into the bundle of life with other people, and we become who we are to a large extent through the relationships that we have with others. That's why we're here and why we're connecting in to the service. At some time and in some way, Prue Wilson touched our lives and we touched hers. And in those experiences, no matter how great or small, she became part of us and we became part of her. And with her death, a little bit of us dies too. And because we live on, a little bit of her lives on in us. We don't take the death of another person lightly. Human life and human personality are too important, and we value and cherish it. When we lose something of immense worth and significance, when someone dies, we are given 2 gifts to help us deal with the sense of loss. And one is the gift of grief, and the other is the gift of thanksgiving. And the 2 go together. We grieve deeply for what we lose, but at the same time, we are thankful for what we have had. And so today we come to express our sadness and grief at Prue's death, and to give thanks for her life and her achievements. And we're going to do that in a variety of ways. We will sing and pray, and listen to music that was important to Prue. We'll listen to words of scripture and to poetry and the deep felt words that come out of significant memories. We'll take time to remember and give thanks, and we'll take our leave and say goodbye. But now it's time to sing, and we've been assisted this time by the choir of the church in Madras, and the hymn is Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of Creation. Let us pray. We have come here because Prue has died, and the reality of her death is here before us. We come to express our grief, to listen to some great words of faith, to share memories, to give thanks, and to say goodbye. We come seeking hope and peace and love, and the gifts of strength, perspective, and courage to enable us to continue to live lovingly and creatively and generously. Amen. Prue chose a variety of readings for today, and out of those we've chosen 3, and they reflect some of her thinking, but as you listen, you'll also see that they reflect some of the influence that they exerted on the way that she herself lived. And we're beginning with Micah, and then Romans, and then Corinthians. So,
right. The first reading is actually going to be by Prue rather than Henny, so I may have to zoom on. Sorry. Oh, there's some people that haven't been admitted to. Okay, where's John?
So if you're speaking, just make sure that green light on the microphone is pressed on. Back up on one row.
Am I right?
So I'm speaking through from there.
Yes, Joanna speaking. How do we do that?
We just need to turn this back on again.
Okay, Struan, I think you're on. Thank you.
Our reading comes from Micah chapter 6, verses 6 to 8, from the New King James Version. With what shall I come before the Lord, and bow myself before the high God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. May God bless to us that reading from his holy word, and to his name be all glory and praise.
Oh, there he is. Right. Okay, you're muted, Struan. And the sound's still on there. Is that correct?
Yeah,
There?
just press that one.
Okay.
Kia ora koutou. Prue has asked me to read from Romans. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are killed all day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. Yet in all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus, our Lord. Thank you.
Namaste, Prue. There are a couple of things in the world at the moment that go with this reading that Prue has selected, and I want to mark them before making the reading. About this time every year, New Zealand celebrates International Dance Day. And whether we dance in the intellect or the heart or the spirit or physically, it's so superb to remember, Prue, your ability to move us through dance and music, whether it was your regard for the meditative aspects, or the physical gaiety, the swing of the rhythm that comes with the music and the word as well. And also yesterday, the witches' Sabbath, to mark that spirit of magic in all of us. Not tall enough to see the green light either. Okay. And also, International Workers' Day. Workers of the world unite, a lifelong time for Prue of work and so on as well. Harbour in his tribute, he mentioned the joy of working alongside you, Prue. You were always so willing to share anything, never seek solo credit. Your associates are blessed by the relationship with you. So you've chosen this last reading. It's from Corinthians, it's from Paul. Back to Corinth when the church was in great disarray, and it's got lots of good advice for us all. (1 Corinthians 13), the greatest gift. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become as sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part will be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now, we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I also am known. And now abide faith, hope, love, these three. But the greatest of these is love. E hara I te mea noa nāne te aroha, nā ngā tupuna I tuku iho. I tuku iho. Prue, I am so lucky you were my mother-in-law. Kia ora, gentle friend.
There were a number of pieces of music that Prue loved and made suggestions for. We couldn't play them all because we have to be out of here by 5 o'clock. But one that we have chosen is part of Psalm 25. To thee, O Lord, do I lift my soul, my God, I trust in thee. And it's music by Rachmaninoff.
Oh
Okay, can people hear me all right? Okay. Kia ora koutou te whānau. Ki mai ki a hau, he aha te mea nui o te ao. Māku e ki atu, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. If you ask me what is the most important thing in this world, I will reply, people, people, people. This whakatauki is about recognising that other people must be central to our actions as human beings, a concept which sums up my mother and her life journey. Prue was born in Wellington on the 19th of May 1926. She was christened Prudence Joan and was known in her family as Joan to distinguish her from her mother Prue, our nana. Mum's father Jim worked as an accountant for a Wellington importing firm, George and Doughty. Nana Prue had trained as a milliner, a hat maker, and she and her sister Millie had a millinery or hat shop on Ridderford Street in Newtown, near the John Street intersection, just across from the hospital. For the first few years of Mum's life, they shared a house in Hanson Street with Millie and her husband, Harold Bigwood. This lasted until one December when Mum was 4. Things became a little tense between the sisters when Nana asked if Millie could mind the shop the next day so that she could take Mum into the city to see Father Christmas. And Millie told her that she'd taken Joan the day before. Jim told Prue that Joan was going to grow up not knowing who her mother was, and that it was time they moved out of Millie and Harold's house. The millinery shop was closed, and Jim and Prue bought their own house at 159 Washington Avenue in Brooklyn. The following year, the young Joan began school at Brooklyn Primary. Mum wrote about this time in her life. One day, I was asked to bring an exercise book to school, and Mother managed to find one in the house that had a used first page. She very carefully removed the front and back pages, and I took it to the teacher next day. I very clearly remember standing by the teacher's desk while she slowly and silently inspected it, and I heaved a big sigh of relief when it passed muster. Mum's experience of growing up during the Depression without much money to go around made her understanding of and compassionate towards those who were in need throughout her entire life. At the end of 1933, when Mum was 7, Jim and Prue bought the Empire Drapery in Island Bay, where they lived above the shop over the road from the Empire Cinema. When she was older, Mum became the delivery girl for the shop, taking parcels all around Island Bay on her bicycle. The family were regular attendees at the Methodist Church in Mersey Street. During the polio epidemic in the summer of 1936-1937, an event that I think we can now sympathise with a lot more than we probably would have a few months ago, Mum was sent to the Rye Valley to stay with her cousin Marion Gurley and her husband Hugh Scott, who were farming there. Mum loved this time, as there were plenty of neighbours' children to play with and lots to do on a farm. Marion's daughter Elaine is participating in the service today, online from Canada. Mum's cousins on her mother's side were also very important to her, Noel Sutherland and Pat Struan and Ken Munro. Mum remembered going to stay at Rugged Ridges with Aunt Olive and Uncle Grant, and where her cousin Pat taught her to ride a horse. Joan was encouraged to learn piano, although her heart yearned more for dancing, which Nana disapproved of, since ballet seemed to involve not wearing enough clothes, in her opinion. Joan also had speech lessons. She didn't enjoy piano with her first teacher, but when she began learning from Ina Connor in Pyrie Street, she began to discover joy in her music. She told me that Ina would begin every lesson by asking about school and home before they began any music. I think Mum learned from this wonderful teacher the importance of relationships and nurturing a student's self-confidence. Eventually, Mum went on to gain her ATCL in both pianoforte and speech. She attended Island Bay Primary and later Wellington East Girls College. Her closest friend at primary and secondary school was Ellen Berthold, later Ellen Ramsden, who lived close by and remained a lifelong friend. Another Wellington East friend was Margaret Selkeld, later Margaret Bickford. It was at Wellington East that Mum became Prue rather than Joan, because, by request of the school, as there were 3 or 4 Joans in her class. After this, Mum was Joan to her family and Prue to the rest of the world. At Wellington East, Prue, as we can now call her, studied 2 Shakespeare plays every year, which she loved, but she was always very proud of the fact that she had discovered the delights of Shakespeare for herself before she ever made it to high school, reading a copy of As You Like It, which she found in her father's little bookcase. When she left school, Mum went to Teachers College, mainly because that was what everyone else seemed to be doing. The alternatives were nursing, the army, or secretarial work. She proved to be a natural teacher, incredibly patient, and with the knack of helping her students feel good about themselves. At Teachers College, the students were encouraged to enrol part-time at university. This was a novel idea. Neither of Mum's parents had even been to high school. She enrolled for 1 paper and was extremely surprised to pass it. Then she realised that if she kept doing that, she could get a whole degree. In 1945, Mum was in the Teachers College drama team, which went to Winter Tourney in August in Auckland. On the train on the way there, the news came through that Japan had surrendered and the war in the Pacific was over. Apparently there was, quote, little sleep on the train that night and much beer was consumed, unquote. It was that same year that Mum's cousin Struan, who did the first reading, came to live with his Auntie Prue and Uncle Jim in Island Bay so that he could go to school in Wellington. Struan became very much Mum's little brother, and the bond between them has always remained very strong. At the end of her teacher training, Mum did 1 full-time year at university to finish her BA. And this was when she became aware of an extremely handsome returned serviceman in her Stage 1 French lecture. This was the dashing Martin Wilson, back from the Air Force's Coastal Command and studying to teach English at secondary school. Mum would carelessly leave her books on the bench behind her where he sat so that she could flirt with him when she moved them out of his way. The relationship was not all plain sailing, however, as his mother felt that Prue was beneath him since her parents were in trade. Pressure was put on Martin to forget about girls and concentrate on his studies. However, love won out in the end. Prue and Martin married on July the 3rd, 1948, and rented rooms in a house in Island Bay, not too far from the drapery. Mum began teaching full-time at Berhampore School in 1949, while Dad was still at Teachers College. Excuse me, I'm just going to pause. I have to go mute somebody, apparently. But not me. This one's not meant to be muted, is it? Okay. Sorry, people. Just slight technical problem here. I'm sorry, I cannot find Tanya, but she needs to mute her microphone, please. Thank you. Okay. Prue and Joan married in July 1948 and rented rooms in a house in Island Bay, not far from the drapery. Mum was teaching full-time at Berhampore School and Dad was still at Teachers College. In 1950, using a return services rehab loan of £1,000, they bought a new 2-bedroom house in Wainuiomata. Dad got a teaching job at Hutt Valley High School and Mum at Wainuiomata School. In 1952, my brother Doug was born, followed by Gordon in 1955. After Dad completed his MA, Mum encouraged him to get singing lessons. He learned from Stanley Oliver and Donald Munro and was soon winning competitions and singing solo roles for the newly formed New Zealand Opera Company. Prue and Martin were also involved in the local Wainui dramatic and choral societies, a pattern that would continue throughout their lives. In 1957, the family moved to Waimate in the South Island, which was a promotion for Dad to head of English. Dad made a number of solo broadcasts of Schubert Lieder for Radio New Zealand and encouraged Mum to audition for Radio New Zealand. After that, she accompanied all his broadcasts on piano. She found live broadcast a little stressful, but did a brilliant job. During this period, Granddad Jim was hit by a car in Wellington and died from his injuries. Nana discovered that the drapery business was not doing well and that Jim had remortgaged their Brooklyn house, which had been rented out while they lived above the drapery, to her own sister, Dot. Nana was devastated. She built the business back up and sold it and the house to repay the mortgage, then came to Waimate to live with Mum and Dad. Nana lived with our family from that time onwards. In 1959, Prue and Martin, Nana and the two boys moved to Murupara, where Dad was head of English at Rangatahi College. Coming from Otaki, Dad enjoyed the bicultural nature of the school, and he and Prue enthusiastically... now you can't hear me? Yep, the Zoom can hear me. How's that? Oh, okay. Yeah, he and Prue enthusiastically instituted a bicultural speech and drama festival. This was when Mum started teaching senior English at the college and loved it. I was born in 1961, a most important event. In 1962, the family relocated to Te Aroha, where Dad was again head of English. My sister Janet was born in 1965. Mum had achieved her goal of 2 boys and 2 girls, and in that order, which was the family that she had told Dad she wanted when they got married. It was in 1966, the year Prue was to turn 40, that she and Dad embarked on the big adventure of teaching overseas. Dad was appointed head of English at Tanjong Loban College in Miri, Sarawak, on the coast of Borneo. For Prue, it was a big undertaking, moving to Sarawak with 4 children, ranging from Doug, aged 14, to Janet, who was only 9 months old, and her 83-year-old mother in tow. But she thrived in this environment. I remember one time she took me walking with Janet in the pushchair to the dairy, and we were accosted by a very aggressive goose. Mum grabbed it firmly by the neck, spun it around and hurled it. No bird was threatening her children. I would add that no goose was permanently harmed in this incident. I turned 5 in July that first year in Murray, and as the local English-run school did not take pupils at that age, Mum promptly started up a new entrant class in our house with a number of children of expats who were of a similar age and taught us all to read. She was also taking private piano pupils at this time. When I started school, Mum got a job teaching at a local primary school in Murray. After 2 years in Malaysia, Mum and Dad headed to Te Reo College in the Cook Islands in 1968. Doug and Gordon went to boarding school in Oamaru, but Jan and I and Nana got to experience island life. I have wonderful memories of our time in Raro. I remember Mum writing and directing a play for us and the neighbouring kids to perform. It involved a dragon and a princess and included musical items accompanied by Mum on piano, one of which was "My eyes are dim, I cannot see, I have not brought my specs with me." I'm not quite sure how that related to the Dragon Quest. Dad and Mum were very involved in music at the college, and I vividly remember the Te Reo College choir rehearsing the Hallelujah chorus in our living room, with Dad conducting and Mum playing the piano. From Rarotonga, the family moved back to New Zealand in 1970. Dad took a job as head of English at Harbour High School, where Mum taught English and also junior French. Mum and Dad directed Sheila Wynne Shakespeare scenes and a production of HMS Pinafore, with more rehearsals in our living room, featuring Mum on piano and also teaching students how to dance the hornpipe. She was very involved in the Repertory Society in Harbour and did props for a number of productions. Somehow, while doing all of this, Mum also ferried me to swimming club, gymnastics, brownies and ballet, and to swimming carnivals all over Taranaki. Dad's health was problematic at this time, and he decided to take early retirement. He encouraged Mum to apply for the head of English job at Kerikeri High School, where Brian Smart, who she knew from Rarotonga, was the principal. By this time, both Doug and Gordon had left home, so in 1975, Mum, Dad, Nana and we 2 girls moved to the far north, with Mum as the breadwinner and Dad as the house husband. We initially lived in a schoolhouse in town, and later Mum and Dad built a 3-bedroom house in Mawson Avenue at Waipapa. Nana's health deteriorated, and Mum had to put her into care in Kawakawa, and Nana died later that year, aged 92. Mum loved being head of department, though she quickly discovered that others that she was working with had a lot more English in their degrees than she did, as her degree had been in education. With Dad's encouragement, she enrolled in distance learning through Massey University to rectify this, revelling in the stage 2 and 3 English papers. Prue and Martin were involved in the local arts society and sang in the Waimate North Consort, a chamber choir directed by Jane Barnett. Prue assisted with directing many drama productions at school. I also remember her heading off on her own during the holidays to attend the Early Music Festival in the Hawke's Bay or Massey courses at Palmerston North, while Dad stayed home to mind us girls, a real role reversal. In 1978, my brother Gordon married Robin Adam, the last time that we had all of us together for a major family occasion. That was my final year at school. So by 1979, it was just Prue, Martin and Janet at home. Dad died in 1980 after surgery to remove a bowel tumour. He was only 56 and Mum was only 54. Dad's death was a big shock to us all, and it took Mum a while to cope and regroup. Janet was in the 5th form that year, so the impact on her was huge. She grew up fast and ended up going to university at Massey in 1982, straight after 6th form. That same year, Mum's first grandchild was born, Gordon's eldest son, Vaughan, who's here in the chapel, as are 4 of the grandsons. Prue stayed teaching at Kerikeri for another 3 years after Janet left home. She saw her crowning achievement at Kerikeri High as the production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which she directed in the big packing shed, which was the Memorial Hall. During that time, Mum finished her English Lit studies at Massey and began to do linguistic papers towards a diploma in teaching English as a second language. She started running to build up her fitness. In 1984, Gordon's second son, Brent, was born. And around this time, Prue dusted off her CV and applied for a job with volunteer service abroad. In 1985, VSA posted her to a position as lecturer in English at the Tonga Teachers Training College in Nuku'alofa. Prue was then 59 years old, much the same age I am now. She had 3 years in Tonga, and at one stage, the Teachers College, the local high school, and the Atanese Institute were coordinating their timetables so that she could teach English at all 3 institutions. She was also finishing her TESOL from Massey by correspondence. Prue came home to New Zealand for Janet and David's wedding in January 1986. In January 1987, I visited Mum in Tonga and watched her complete a 10-kilometre run with the Harriers Club in the broad daylight in the Tongan heat. Her only complaints about living in Tonga involved a rat that she couldn't find or get rid of until someone had fixed the wire netting over her window, and the fact that she'd found a large cockroach, quote, humping her toothbrush. Major disinfecting followed, and she found a container to keep her toothbrush in after that. At one point while she was in Tonga, Prue's gas was cut off. When initial approaches to the local Department of Education proved unsuccessful, she packed a thermos of tea and a bag of marking and established herself in a chair outside the boss's office. She politely but firmly refused to leave until someone paid her gas bill and reconnected it.
So it's fine on there, I believe. One room having issues.
Sorry, people, technical hitch.
You're doing great.
There's a brand new mattress straight over the back, so if things don't work, I don't know what will.
Okay, somebody said that it needed to be pointing a little bit more towards me too.
Okay, I'll do it. So,
No, maybe not closer, but just more
towards
direct.
you.
Right, so the little white-haired Palangi woman sitting in the corridor and refusing to leave achieved her goal, needless to say. Her gas bill was paid and it was reconnected. Is that all right? It's very echoey.
Just not pointing so much at the speak.
so that was the Prue method of persuasion, and very successful, of course. That last year Prue was in Tonga, 2 more grandchildren were born, Philip and Gordon's youngest son Philip, and Doug and Ann's son Alex. In 1988, Prue returned to New Zealand and moved to Wellington, beginning the part of her life that probably a lot of her listeners and Wellington friends are more familiar with. She bought a 2-bedroom flat in an apartment block in Marchbank Street in Mount Victoria. She was back in her hometown, aged 62, and was volunteering to teach English to recent immigrants through the Home Language Tutors Project. She taught ESOL at Wellington Polytech Summer School and Wellington Community Institute. That year, I enrolled part-time at Vic to do my diploma in Māoritanga, and Mum enrolled in the introductory Māori language papers with me. As well as the Māori language papers and her ESOL teaching, she took a Middle English paper. Mum and I were also both having singing lessons at that time from Rosie Salas, who has recorded a song for this service. In 1989, Prue did English Honours postgraduate studies in a full-time year at Vic, graduating with an upper second degree. She was continuing her ESOL teaching and also fostered a couple of teenagers through the Open Home Foundation. I also recall her doing a ropes course and an ice experience course at the Outdoor Pursuit Centre and participating in a women's only traverse of the North Island from coast to coast around this time. It was as if Prue had a bucket list and was intent on sucking the marrow out of life, and good on her. 1990 was a very difficult year as we lost my brother Doug, aged 38, to leukaemia. This was very hard for Mum, and like Dad's loss, it took her a while to bounce back. Speaking of bouncing, one weekend around this time, Mum and I drove up to New Plymouth to stay with Gordon, who by that time had separated from Robin and was living at Arawa Street. The boys were there for the weekend and they had a pogo stick. I don't know if you guys remember this. I looked at it enviously and decided that I was probably a bit too old for that. I was 29. 64-year-old Mum had no such qualms. The moment she saw it, she exclaimed, "Oh, that looks like fun, can I have a go?" And next minute, Mum was on the ground with a broken ankle, looking very surprised that things hadn't worked out according to her plan. I remember the day not long after that Mum showed me an advertisement for a job through AIT at Lampang College of Commerce and Technology in Thailand. She asked me a little tentatively, what did I think? Was it a crazy idea? I said, go for it. And in 1993, aged 67, Prue was off to Lampang, where she lectured in English and advised on course design. She thoroughly enjoyed the work and was amused by the fact that at this school it was the staff who wore the uniform and not the students. On one holiday, Mum's idea of a good time was to go on an elephant trek up towards the Cambodian border to see the poppy fields. Like, this is the opium industry you're talking about here. She wrote to Janet that it was a great trip and her elephant only stampeded once. After 3 years in Thailand, Prue took a 2-year contract in Medan, Indonesia, at the Logo Education Centre. Arrangements here were a little dodgy. At one point, Prue was put on a plane to Singapore for a day and back so that she could renew her visa. When she returned to Indonesia, she was detained at the airport and had to wait until someone from Logo came and bribed officials to let her into the country. In her second year in Medan, Mum's time in Indonesia came to an abrupt end when she broke her femur spectacularly. She had to be flown back to Wellington for surgery, a very expensive trip. As it turned out, she didn't have any travel insurance. Apparently that had been too expensive. Prue was still on crutches in May 1996 when we organised a big party for her 70th birthday at Crossways. It was at this time that Mum had to give up running, as the fracture had revealed that she had really bad osteoporosis, so it was at high risk of further fractures if she had a fall. Having decided that she probably shouldn't go teaching overseas again now, Prue renewed her teacher registration in New Zealand and began teaching ESOL at Wellington East for a group of refugee students, supervising correspondence school work for students at the New Zealand School of Dance and providing language support for some of the Japanese dance students, among whom I particularly remember Takashi. In 1999, aged 73, Mum decided she needed, wait for it, more education. So she completed a Masters in Linguistics at Vic, a Masters in Linguistics with merit, I should say, all the while maintaining her teaching at the School of Dance. After graduating again in 2000, Prue came backpacking in Europe with Sean and me for 3 months. We went to Italy, Germany, France and the UK together. On a beachfront in Sicily, an elderly Italian gentleman approached me and asked how old Mum was. I told him 74. He gazed at her admiringly, throwing up his hands and saying, 74! Complimenti, signora, complimenti! He was clearly, hadn't seen very many septuagenarian backpackers and he was very impressed. Yeah. Probably the highlight of the trip from Prue's point of view was when we saw Hamlet at Shakespeare's Globe in London. She and I in paid seats and Sean standing in the groundlings pit for the entire performance. Back in New Zealand, Prue still hadn't quite got the hang of retirement. And she was assisting with reading recovery and ESOL at the Clyde Key School. Over Christmas 2000-2001, she had a full-time job as an assistant teacher at the English Language Institute Summer School at Victoria University. She had her own office at the university and a nameplate on the door and saw this as a highlight of her teaching career. In 2001, Prue's eldest grandson, Vaughan, came to live with her in her Mount Vic flat while he was studying for his degree at Massey, Wellington. That year also saw the birth of Janet and David's eldest son, Joshua. Prue continued to work as a relieving teacher for the Capital Language Academy and was still acting as a volunteer tutor for the Wellington ESOL Home Tutor Service. In 2003, Janet's second son, Hamish, was born, bringing Mum's total of grandsons to 6, granddaughters 0. By the beginning of 2004, Vaughan was in his last year at Massey Wellington and my brother Gordon was beginning a law degree at Vic on a retraining arrangement after having been made redundant by Methanex when they moved to Australia. He stayed in Wellington during the week and headed home to his partner Philippa in New Plymouth most weekends. When Vaughan graduated and moved out of Prue's spare room, his dad Gordon moved in and lived with Mum until he finished his law degree. It was while Gordon was living with Prue that she declared her intention of doing the Trans-Mongolian and Trans-Siberian railways. As nearly as we can recall, this was in 2006, the year that she turned 80, the occasion of another grand birthday bash at Crossways. We persuaded her to join a tour group to provide a bit of extra security and made sure she had good travel insurance this time. Mum flew off to Hong Kong, travelled through China, stayed overnight in a yurt, saw Cossacks racing their horses beside the train, and safely made it to Moscow, St. Petersburg, and triumphantly home to New Zealand, having had a wonderful trip. In these years, Prue finally stopped doing relieving teaching, but she was still going to Scottish country dancing and the Shakespeare Society, activities I find I have forgotten to mention, along with Jennifer Shannon's dance group. Prue went to ballet, the opera, concerts and movies. She and I went to choral fed May workshops together. I've also failed to mention her earlier years of participation in the Wellington Gilbert and Sullivan Society, kicking up her heels in the chorus line and playing Buttercup in HMS Pinafore. Although I've not said much about Prue's faith journey and her church activities, these were central to her life. From her childhood, in every place she has lived, she has always found a church home and been a regular member of the congregation. When she moved back to Wellington and bought her flat in Mount Vic, she became part of the Crossways Presbyterian Church, of which Jim Cunningham here was the minister at the time. And that Crossways later amalgamated with St Andrews. She was delighted to be made an elder at St Andrews. By the time Gordon finished his law degree at the start of 2009, Prue had begun having transient ischemic attacks which affected her memory. When he went back to New Plymouth, Mum made the decision herself to move into the Rangus retirement village, and she bought her service apartment there in August 2009. After an initial adjustment period, she threw herself into the fitness classes and village activities. She even acquired a boyfriend around this time, Doug Elliott, whom she had met at St Andrews. This relationship gave her a lot of pleasurable companionship, and it was a shame that she and Doug did not have more time together before his health deteriorated and he passed away. Prue was very happy at Rita Angus and received very loving care from all the staff. We always felt secure in the knowledge that she was safe and well cared for when we couldn't be there. We were really pleased that so many family and friends were able to attend Prue's 90th birthday party at Rita Angus in 2016, a most wonderful celebration and acknowledgement of her. I was grateful that Mum was able to be part of my wedding in 2017 And I know Alex and Laura were delighted that Prue was able to be there for theirs in January 2019. It was not until October last year that Prue had to relinquish her service department and move upstairs to the rest home part of Rita Angus. There, she has continued to have superb and loving care. It's very difficult to sum up such an action-packed 94 years. I've gone two times over the limit of time that was given to me, and this speech is actually half the length that it started out. And I still feel like I've left an awful lot out, and I'm sure that there are people listening who have wonderful stories of Prue to share, and if they're not participating in the service to tell us, then they could go and put them on the tributes page, please. Prue's been an adventurer, continually stretching her own boundaries and looking for challenges. Hers has been a life of love, compassion, and service to others. For her, the most important thing has always been people, people, people. I'm very grateful to have had such a mother. Moi mai te whaia, kei roto I taroha au tō matua i ki a ihu kraiti.
Thank you, Jess. As you were speaking, I became increasingly aware that one word kept popping up, and that was the word dance and dancing. So perhaps it's appropriate that the next hymn is Lord of the Dance, and you may want to sing it, or you may want to sit quietly and think of the ways that Prue has danced through your life. Thanks, Peter. Now I think we cross to New Plymouth, and Gordon's going to speak.
How do I do that?
It's about halfway down. There's a button.
Okay, Gordon, I think you're good to go.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Great, okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this celebration of Prue's life. And we've just heard it was quite some life, especially after 50. I am one of the lucky group of people that get to call Prue Wilson mum. Mum also answered to Prudy, Hobbitses, and middle-sized billy goat Gruff. I'm going to share with you what I thought was remarkable about Prue and tell some stories about her that will help to illustrate the kind of person that she was. Prue, you were never one to blow your own trumpet, but today, I'm sorry, but I'm going to let my pride and my admiration of you get the better of me, and I'm going to make you blush. Prue was adventurous and courageous. You've heard how our family moved to live in Malaysia for a teaching position for Martin. While our family was living in Malaysia, an incident took place that resulted in my brother and I seeing Prue in a new light. The incident took place one afternoon when Prue took Janet out for a walk in the pushchair along the road to the school where Martin worked. After returning from the walk, Prue took Janet out of her pushchair and then pulled the body of a small, brightly coloured snake out of her handbag. Prue asked Doug and I if we could find out what kind of snake it was. Doug and I presumed Prue must have found the snake dead on the road. As the conversation proceeded, Prue told us that while pushing Janet along the road in the pushchair, Prue had spotted the snake crossing the road. Prue was naturally cautious, so she stopped to let the snake cross the road. Prue said that to her surprise, the snake had suddenly turned and headed directly towards Prue and Janet. Prue then calmly described how she had removed her shoe and used it to club the snake to death. After referring to our home encyclopedia, Doug and I gave Mum the sobering news that the snake was, or in this case had been, deadly poisonous. Doug and I were in awe of Prue that day and learned the important lesson that one takes a serious risk when one comes between a mother and their child. Prue was a great mum who encouraged her children to follow their passions, whatever those passions or interests might be. As a teenager, I recall making a number of choices that must have disappointed Prue, but bless her, she never gave me a hard time about any of them. At 16 years of age, I discovered for the first time that I was not bulletproof when I shattered my thigh bone in a motorcycle accident and ended up in hospital with my leg in traction. Prue, like most parents, could not have been pleased that I'd fallen deeply in love with motorcycling, especially when that passion appeared to be putting my well-being at risk. I never heard Prue say a negative word about my choice of transport, even after I repeatedly roared up and down the street outside the family home on my motorcycles at speeds obviously well above the speed limit. My broken thigh bone resulted in me being hospitalised for over 6 months. One afternoon after I'd been in hospital for some months, Prue visited me, bringing a parcel with her. She encouraged me to open up the parcel, and to my surprise, I pulled out my motorcycle boots. Prue told me that one of the boots had had the sole ripped off it during my accident. It turned out that Prue had taken the boots to be repaired, had cleaned them, and then brought them into me so they'd be handy when I needed them. I have to say, Mum cheered me up that day. I also got a lot of fun out of watching the look on the faces of my friends as I explained to them what my motorcycle boots were doing by my bedside. Prue had a resilient character and a positive outlook. Despite experiencing some major tragedies in her life, which you've heard about, the early loss of her husband Martin and my older brother Douglas, Prue was able to remain positive and cheerful. She didn't seem to have setbacks, just challenges that she responded to. I believe the anchors that kept Prue secure during these most challenging periods of her life were her strong Christian faith, her sense of humour, and the pleasure she got from supporting others who needed her. Prue believed there was no situation in life that could not be improved by making a cup of tea, which in her case would usually mean time to think about or discuss the issues at hand. Prue had a remarkable capacity to care about others and demonstrated this in the way she behaved towards others, irrespective of how she came to know them, or indeed whether she knew them at all. Prue gained a lot of satisfaction from giving to others in lots of ways. Prue was a Christian who truly walked the talk. When the family took over managing Prue's financial affairs, we discovered that for many years Prue had been making regular donations to a number of charities, while at the same time giving generously of her time to others. After Prue retired from teaching full-time in Kerikeri and moved to Wellington, you've heard that she volunteered to work for an organisation that provided English lessons to immigrants. Prue's students found they could not get Prue to accept money or gifts as payment for her time, but they discovered that she would accept the occasional invitation to dine with them. I stayed with Prue in Wellington from 2005 until 2009. When Prue's students discovered her son was living with her, Prue's dinner invitations were extended to include me. The Thai and Indian meals that I enjoyed as a result were among the most delicious meals I have ever eaten. I had done nothing to deserve being treated as such an honoured guest, but could not refuse when it was obvious how good it made Prue's students feel to be able to show respect to Prue. A friend of my partner, Philippa, once told me a lovely story about Prue. Philippa's friend told me how Prue had volunteered to provide free remedial reading lessons to students at a Wellington primary school where he was a teacher. He confessed the school could not believe their luck and were quick to take up Prue's offer. After Prue had been teaching part-time at the school for some months, a parent told Philippa's friend how delighted she was with their son's progress at the school. The boy concerned had a reading disability and found written schoolwork such a struggle that his mother had been having real problems getting him to go to school. When Prue found out this boy had to complete a project and then make a presentation of it, she volunteered to help the boy use photographs to tell his story. Prue accompanied the boy as he walked around Wellington, taking photographs for his project, and then helped him to use those photos to prepare his presentation. The boy's presentation had been such a success that his grateful mother disclosed that she believed that Prue's intercession with her son was the reason that he was now enjoying school so much he couldn't wait to leave for school each morning. Pablo Casals is quoted as saying, "It is the capacity to care that gives life its deepest significance." Prue, I believe that the impact of your life has been truly significant. You have led by example. The ripple effect of how you have loved and befriended and given of yourself to us and so many others must be enormous. Your capacity to care will live on in your family and those who knew you. I am one of the many who feel blessed to have known you. God bless you, Prue. We will miss you. That concludes my tribute to Prue.
I think that should be right now.
Jess, you mentioned the time when you and Prue had singing lessons from Rosie Salas, and we've got a recording now of Rosie singing Jenny McLeod's Indigo 2, Light of Lights, Beholden.
Light of lights, beholden, we from days of olden sang this song. For to understand Darkness all around us, light has always found us, light will come. Where the dark is deepest, greater light will keep us safe from harm. Troubled times will always find a voice of troubled doom. Look towards the light and carry on. Let the simple heart and hope among us keep our family strong. Let the simple heart and hope among us keep our family strong.
Now we've got to cross to Auckland to catch up with Janet.
Just mute you for a minute. And don't forget to come back and unmute. All good? Everyone hear me? Hi, guys. So I'm Janet, Prue's daughter, and Mum told me a long time ago that she wanted a happy funeral. Actually, what she really said to me was, you better have fun at my funeral or I'll come back and haunt you. I'm sure it would be quite nice to be haunted by Prue and not in the least bit scary. She would never wish to haunt me at a time that was inconvenient or that was in any way going to make me truly worried or scared. I think at best I might just sort of feel a chill if I didn't use a tea bag twice or if I threw out leftovers. I think she really wanted a funeral to be a bit like a Shakespeare comedy. No small amount of revelry, some good music and dancing, a lot of wit and poetry, and an eventual triumphant happy ending after some plot twists. Well, I think we've got some technical plot twists today. And that would be much like her 90th birthday party, which so many people attended. Never in our wildest dreams did we anticipate that we would be farewelling Mum in this strange and unique way and not being all together to do so. I've always thought of Mum's side of the family and her upbringing to be a little bit like a Jane Austen novel. All those 5 Bennet sisters, Olive, Lulu, Dot, Millie and Prue Senior. But for this occasion, I've been reflecting on our Prue's true character. Prue did live up to her name and was indeed prudent and never wasteful. She could just as easily, however, have been named Charity or Hope or Faith. She characterised and embodied all those virtues. But what strikes me most about Mum is how genuine and consistent she was. Prue didn't so much enjoy teaching as she enjoyed helping other people learn. And she never gave up on anyone. In fact, I think she saw disengaged or disinterested students as a challenge. And she eventually wore them down with relentless and persistent niceness. As one fellow Kerikeri High School student said seriously once to me, it's just impossible to dislike your mother. If she could ignite in any student the love of a literary character, a quote, a play, or whatever was being taught, then those were moments she cherished. I'm sure Mum would not have considered herself to be a remarkable person at all, just another thing that made her remarkable. She is, to me, a great example of how one person can make a difference in this world. Quietly and without fuss, she achieved a lot in her life and made an impact on the lives of so many others. She lived her life with a gentle dignity, integrity, generosity, faith, and duty and heart. She is, for me, an example of what duty was intended to mean, not obligation, but a calling to serve, and what lived Christianity looks like. Everyone mattered to Prue, and no one was more or less deserving, interesting, or important in her eyes. She was the first to offer help and assistance to others at all times. She was generous with her time, her energy, her skills, as well as her modest shekels. Most importantly, Mum was never happier than when she felt useful. Every towel and apron she has mended at Rita Angus is testament to that. A proofreader, a sounding board, a peacemaker, a translator, and an adventurer throughout her life. Dad was indeed a lucky fellow, and perhaps he even knew it too. She was generous, we as children never wanted for anything and were indulged in activities like ballet, drama, music, and of course, good books. I remember a friend of mine's father proudly showing Prue and I a tour of his impressive modern new house many years ago. And when we were home alone later, I asked her how she had liked it. And she said, "Did you notice there wasn't a book in the whole house? None whatsoever. So cold and empty." Most of our family sayings are quotes from favoured books or plays. When my son Josh was around 8, he decided that it was time to try and read The Hobbit. I suggested he check and see if we had a copy in the bookcase. He came back having found a beautifully colour illustrated hardcover copy with the inscription inside that read, "To Joshua from Nana Prue on the occasion of his first birthday." On her return to Wellington, I once asked her on a cold, wintry day why, if she loved the tropics and heat so much, she hadn't considered retiring in Australia. This is one for the cousins. She said, "Oh, Australia is very, very nice to visit, but I could never live there." And I said, "Why, Mum?" "The vowels." For someone who was such a passionate teacher and academic, it always amazes me that she gave her full support to me leaving school after sixth form to study subjects like sociology and psychology and anthropology at university. And when the headmaster and a family friend, out of concern, I'm sure, suggested to Prue that she should really try and make me stay for a 7th form year, Mum said no. School subjects hold no interest for Janet, and she would be far better off going off to do what interested her. I jokingly say that Mum and I left home at about the same time. After Dad had died and she felt that I, being the youngest, was established at university, she felt free to take off herself again and go teaching overseas, this time on her own. Prue did what I call a fair trade in hot curries for English lessons around the globe. A currency and an occupation she enjoyed above all others, and one she undertook wherever she was, making lifelong friends doing so along the way. I recall visiting her when she was living and working in northern Thailand. When we were wandering around the city, we would stop outside some of the local shops and she would say, "Now be sure to buy something from this shop." And then we would pop in and she would introduce me to the shopkeeper. And while I was choosing something to purchase, they would then call out the whole family to meet me. And she would have been, of course, regularly giving English lessons to them all in her spare time. Mum was fortunate to have many happy years and live a full life. She got so much enjoyment from her travels and adventures, from her academic extramural studies, her teaching, her voluntary work, her family, her friends, her church fellowship, and her love of dance, literature, and music. And as the mini strokes and memory loss reduced her world somewhat, I referred to it as a diminishing round. It was a song she sang with grace and acceptance. She was happy with her life and her lot. I'm very grateful and have a heart full of thanks to the Rita Angus staff for the care they gave her, and to my sister Jess for how she's cared for Prue in these last years. And like Gordon, for Prue herself, our lives are richer for having known her, and if I could be half the person she was, I'd be better than I can imagine. To her I shall say, good night, good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say good night till it be morrow. Good night, sweet Prue, may flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. And when she wakes in heaven and asks, what tea is it? I hope God puts on a decent cuppa or there'll be hell to pay. I just want to add a few thank yous as well. Mum specifically requested Peter Franklin play the organ for her funeral, and in fact she asked to be put on ice until he was available. Her comment to me was that some people play the organ very well, but Peter is a true artist. High praise indeed, and we thank him for being here today and willingly playing for Prue. And she's chosen a corker piece of organ music which he's recorded for the end of the service. And we want to thank Jim for officiating the service and Vaughan for putting together the beautiful slideshow that you're about to see. Thanks, guys.
You've got to unmute.
Okay.
We're back live, I think. Thanks, Janet. And over to Vaughan and the slideshow.
I'm not sure how the next part's going to work.
Maybe I should come up. So we're at the sharing memories part, and Struan wants to say a few words, and after that, Elaine, and anyone else that's on the Zoom.
And Sue.
Sue?
Ah.
Okay. Okay. All right, so I will, where are we? Elaine. And, oh, hang on a minute. Unmute. Now, if we're going through the Zoom feed, I still need to leave the sound on here, don't I? Yep. Okay. I think you're on, Elaine. Hi, Ian. Hi, Elaine.
Hi there. Hi, Struan.
Oh,
I'll be
sorry.
very.
Oh, was I meant to put Struan first? Never mind. Go, Elaine.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. I'll be very quick because I think you're running short of time, and I must say that Prue would have been delighted at all the effort you've gone into for putting on this celebration of her life under such circumstances. But I'd just like to say I'm delighted to be able to say a few words about Prue, whom I knew as Joan. And I suspect that Struan and I are probably the only participants that knew her as Joan Milligan. And she was always Joan to our family. But she was extremely important to our family. I come from the Milligan side of Prue's family. Her father was my grandmother's brother. My mother lost her father in 1908 when she was only 4. Uncle Jim, Prue's father, moved in as my grandmother's boarder to provide both moral and economic support, and lived there until he married Joan's mother, my great aunt Prue. Uncle Jim was the father that Mum never had. Actually, years later, when we were living in Levin and Prue's father was struck by a car and died later in hospital, we traveled to Wellington in a taxi that was unheard of in those days. We did not own a car, and Mum just had to be there as quickly as possible to provide support. Prue was very highly thought of by the Milligan family. Her parents were older when she was born, and they thought she was just the most marvelous child they were lucky enough to have, and she was. She was a devoted daughter, and as Jess said, and I think Janet mentioned as well, after her father died, moved her mother up to Kerry and looked after her for many years. I always thought that Martin was just wonderful, as it's not easy having a member of your wife's family living in your home. Prue's greatest joy was her children and grandchildren. When I visited her, she loved to talk about their exploits. Her next joy was her life as an educator, which she shared with Martin. She would love to talk about the plays she had helped her students produce, and I'm sure that she was a wonderful teacher. After her retirement, she took great joy in teaching English as a second language, and she would tell me all about her students and how hard they were working. In her later years, she used to reminisce even more, and she'd tell me all about the recitals that she and Martin had produced on radio in New Zealand when they were living down south. My father thought the world of Prue, and vice versa. After Mum died, Prue would arrive, her sleeping bag in hand, and visit with Dad and stay overnight. As Jess mentioned, when she was about 12, she was sent down to the Rye Valley to stay with Mum and Dad because of the polio outbreak. She managed to come down with chicken pox, and she told me that Dad would spend hours with her in the evening, keeping her entertained. I think that they cemented a very close relationship then. I should add that she was also the flower girl at Mum and Dad's wedding. After my sister Joy died in the Erebus disaster, she took great interest in Joy's 3 children, who at that time were only 2, 4, and 6. She always wanted to know what they were up to, and even came up to Canada for Kerry's wedding here on Vancouver Island. She then packed her backpack, booked herself on the Greyhound bus, went through to Alberta because she just had to see the Rockies, and booked herself into the youth hostel to stay there. I always love having long conversations with Prue and with Martin when he was alive. I mentioned that Martin had bad health. We lived in Regina in the middle of Canada, where it gets 40 below in the wintertime, and he insisted that I go into the bay and get him some ear muffs. Of course, this was summertime in Canada, wintertime back there, but he was finding it so hard on his ears when he went out for his walks. And so I always had lovely, lively conversations with Martin. In later years, when I was visiting my sister's second daughter, Heidi, in Wellington, I would walk over to the Rita Angus home and knock on her door. This was even after she was having a few memory problems. She would always know who I was, even unannounced, and then she would settle in for a trip down memory lane over a cup of tea. Prue was a highly intelligent woman, a very gracious individual, and a very caring person. I will miss our chats, and I will miss Prue. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Elaine. And we're going to go to Struan now. Sorry, Struan. And
Okay.
yep. I can hear you, but I can't see. Gotcha. Okay, I think you're right, Struan.
All right. Firstly, what a wonderful tribute that you, Jess, Gordon, and Janet have given to Prue. I spent 12 years with Aunt Prue and Uncle Jim in Wellington, and part of those years were with Joan. I just want to give a couple of very short anecdotes here that I know the three of you would not know at all. Gordon's birthday is on the 14th of March, and Prue had gone full-time about the 10th of March. My birthday is on the 13th of March. So being big brother, I took her for a very bumpy ride over Macra, hoping to bring things on, but to no avail. Prue held on to the 14th. Probably why Gordon's always on the go today. Prue has been pointed out by Jess that she was always known as Joan by all the family because of Aunt Prue, her mother. One thing about Prue and Martin, when Prue was going out with Martin, I, being a very inquisitive teenager, I wanted to know how they met. And all I ever got was, well, I met him at Old Vic. Later, when I was a little older, she confided in me that when attending lectures, she would always try to sit behind or in front of Martin, or would more than once drop a book or two in front, just to get his attention. God bless you, Prue. It's been wonderful seeing faces I haven't seen for a very long time. I love you all. Bye.
Okay, and thank you, Struan. Oh. And next up is Sue. My best buddy, Sue. Okay.
Okay.
Go, Sue.
Thanks, Jess. Family, greetings to all of you. I know some of you by face and I know some of you by reputation. It's a delight to see you all here today, and thank you, Jess and Janet and Gordon. You've put together an amazing tribute to Prue. I know that she's singing along with all the hymns and laughing at all the jokes and the anecdotes and things. I first came to know Jess when I was about 9 years old, and when she moved to Harbour, and we became best buddies when we were in standard 3, I think, or standard 4. And I was lucky enough to become best buddies with Jess, and therefore able to connect with her wonderful family. And so you guys all became my second family when my own family was going through a rough time and falling apart. Martin and Prue became a solid and constant part of my life that helped me to get through that. And, you know, my love for you guys is really very strong, and I appreciate and am so thankful for those times. I always remember never been very good at pronunciation. Prue was always very patient with me, and one of the things that she taught me to say, one of the words she taught me to say was something, because I was always saying something, and she would patiently say something, so something. So I learned how to speak a little better thanks to Prue. I'm still very bad at pronunciation, I think, but anyway, never mind. Prue and Martin were very influential in my life, and Jess, of course, we were together when my mum passed, and it was, she was a great comfort at that time. And now I know that my mum and your mum are having cups of tea and long chats in the next world and celebrating that they all have such wonderful children and families. Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Prue. Thank you, Martin. You guys are so great. And Prue's sense of adventure and how she was always really cool. She never got ruffled. I never ever saw her get cross or really, you know, angry at all. She was really a very cool lady. And when I was able to visit her with Jess when she was at Rita Angus, she would always, you know, she always knew us, and she always was so chatty and telling us stories. And I know that now she'll be so happy to be with Martin and with Doug, because in the last time I went to visit, she was saying, you know, it's good, she is enjoying her life, but she misses the talks that she used to have with Martin, and she was looking forward to the time when she could sit down and have a good talk with him now. So she'll be doing that now. So God bless you, Prue, and God bless us all. And I look forward to catching up with Prue when I get there. Love to you guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Sue. Okay. Now, is there anyone else who wants to say anything? Anyone else on the Zoom? I can't see any names in the chat, but if anyone else wants to, please wave. Okay, I think that's it, Jim. All right, so... I think we're back to here.
Well, let's give thanks for Prue's life. Let us pray. Loving God, we give thanks for the life of Prue Wilson. She was one of life's gifts to us. And as we gather in these last rites of love and respect, we give thanks for the length and the quality of her life. We remember that she had many titles in her life. Daughter, sister, cousin, niece, wife, partner, mother, grandmother, neighbour, colleague, friend. We give thanks for the life which she and Martin shared together, for the love which enabled them to face all the joys and sorrows and challenges that life presented them with. We give thanks for all the ordinary day-by-day loving and caring, for the highlights and the mountaintop experiences which widened their vision and deepened their love. And we give thanks for her strength and courage in facing life without Martin for the last 40 years. We give thanks for all that Prue has meant as mother to Douglas and Gordon and Jessica and Janet. For all the love and care and encouragement over the years. And for all those precious family memories. And we give thanks for all that she means to Anne and Philippa and Sean and David, and all that she has contributed to their lives. And there is a special thanks for those particular people who brought her much joy and pleasure. Vaughan and Brent, Philip, Alex, Josh and Hamish. We give thanks for the warmth of friendship, the encouragement of colleagues, as well as the love of family. We give thanks for her strong faith and for all that she contributed to the life of the faith communities to which she belonged. Love of music, creativity of writing, love of reading, challenge of study, love of conversation, satisfaction of new work, joy and exploration of new ideas. For all these we give thanks. And now today we remember this family. Some gathered here, some in other parts of the country. We wrap them in our love and care, and in the memories of Prue and Martin and Douglas. May there be for them comfort and hope, love and strength, and the care and compassion of true friends. This is our prayer. Amen. It's time to say goodbye. Prue, we've gathered here to remember, but some of us have done more than remember. We've learned so much more about you. But we're glad of the time to remember and to give thanks for your wonderful life. But now it's time to take our leave and let you go. And it's time for you to let us go to the tasks that lie ahead for us. Whatever this life has been, of love, of faith, of beauty, whatever these hands have done from kindness, care or duty, whatever her lasting joy of deepest human feeling, whatever her inner eye has seen of God's revealing, now let her spirit go beyond our time and telling, where love prepares a room and peace has made a dwelling. For as much as the earthly life of Prudence Joan Wilson has come to an end, we commit her body to the elements which are gentle to us at the time of our death. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, stardust to stardust. In the cycle of life and death, the earth is replenished and life is eternally renewed. Rest in peace, Prue. May the mystery of God enfold you. You did quite well when we come to the second hymn, so maybe we should just try singing the last hymn. When we were looking at it, it's the hymn Take My Life, and if you don't know it, you're going to learn it quickly. And when we were talking about it the other day, the family said, this is so much Prue, so let's, as our final tribute, sing Take My Life. Two things before I say the benediction. The first is that normally, in normal circumstances, we'd be going off to have some refreshments. So we're not able to do that here, but you in your own homes might go and put the kettle on and have a cup of tea and talk about Prue. And the second is that the service finishes with a recording done by Peter, especially at Prue's request. And we'll hear that in a few moments. Would you stand for the benediction, please? Go now in peace and in joy to love and to serve, and the grace of the risen Christ, and the love of God, and the presence and strength and creativity of the Spirit be with you and all those you love this day and always. Amen. Peter. I think we should play it again and get up and dance. 2 meters apart, of course. Well, thank you for being here. It's been a wonderful, I think, time and a great tribute to Prue.
Thank you to everyone on the Zoom meeting. I'm going to end it now, but we can hopefully catch up again soon. Thank you so much for participating, everyone.